Cool. Just for my own benefit, because I forgot to ask actually, how do you how do you see things? Like, how do you, in your mind, how do you think suggestions work, and why do they work? And do you think they're like an analog thing? Do you think they're a digital thing, or there's something else? Or do you see them as, like in my mind, I saw them almost like I have a model of reality, or they're an organization of reality.
Yeah.
And if you offer me a suggestion that doesn't work with my reality, you need to give me a lot of those to weigh enough to outweigh my or break my model of reality and force my unconscious mind to, or my conscious mind to create something that works with both.
Well, here's the thing, right? Anything I say to you, anything, regardless of whether it's hypnotic or not, you have to make sense of, right? So the first thing that you need to do is you need to kind of bring that to life within you, what I just said, whatever it might be, right? On some level. So if I said, the quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog, right? You got to do something to make sense of that. You've got to do processing. So you cannot really respond to that without doing some kind of processing. Okay. So what I'm doing is, like, as I've said before, my definition of hypnosis, the use of language and communication, those are our tools to direct attention. Okay. Now we can direct attention uh, towards literally different spaces. Like I could say, you're not paying attention right now to the sensation of your left foot in your shoe, right? Now, there's a direction of attention there in a very literal way. But if I say, if you were to connect deeply into what's possible for you, let's say something like that, right? I'm directing attention in a sense because your mind is going
Hmm.
towards different topics and
Hmm.
different ideas. So there's a sort of internal directing of attention. So the use of language communication to direct attention, lead cognition, right? Where do I want you thinking? Do I want you thinking along with me? Do I want you thinking against me? Do I, what are the series of thoughts I'm inviting you to participate in?
Hmm.
And that's more of a,
The,
yeah, go on.
just to clarify, the difference between leading cognition and directing attention is the attention is more of an awareness, more of a noticing observation, whereas the leading cognition is you're trying to invite a process of
Yeah.
cognization.
And these are not necessarily different things. These are different ways of thinking about things, right? So somebody could say, well, what are you talking about, James? Direct attention and lead cognition? Surely you have to lead cognition in order to direct attention. And surely somebody can, yeah, okay, we can, but we're looking at it from different perspectives,
Hmm.
right? So some people, it's like, well, what are all the variety of ways I can direct attention? And there's what we are paying attention to, and there's what we pay attention through in terms of the ideas. Are we paying attention to
Hmm.
things in the physical spaces around us? Sometimes part of hypnosis is doing that. You say, okay, pick a point on that card that you can focus on fully. That's a very simple direction of attention. Um, you might be leading cognition and you could just notice your thoughts coming and going, right? That's a leading of cognition into a meta position on their own thinking, right? Instead of being like inside of the thoughts, being swept
Hmm.
along,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
So we're leading cognition in that sense. You could also say, well, that's directing attention, isn't it? Because you're inviting them into a different perceptual position on their own thoughts. Yeah, we could look at it like that too. So these are different filters, just ways of looking at things. So we're using language and communication to direct attention, lead cognition, and seed ideas. This is the third, sometimes, for me, the most important element to it, right? So, like, let's say you're caught up in your thinking about something and you're going around and around the same old thought loops, right? And I would just say to you something like, as you go around these thoughts, right? Even if I said that to you while you were thinking about something, as you go around these thoughts, I've sort of paced and led you. I've just actually changed your organization of reality. Like non verbally, I'm making this round and round gesture because I want to suggest to you that you're caught in a thought loop, right? So as you go around these thoughts, right, you're going to go, aha, now you've just shifted your internal attention on your own thoughts. I wonder what it is within all of this that can take you beyond this into things that you haven't even considered are possible yet. Right? Now, there's a suggestion, as have I just done? I'm directing attention, leading cognition, right? I set up a model of reality that I get you to buy into, that thoughts going round. What is it within all of this that can take you beyond all of this? And you might be curious as to what's possible for you as you go beyond all of this now. It's a possible
You're leading cognition
possibility.
outside.
Yeah.
And you're leading cognition outside of this loop. And then on top of that, you're also seeding the idea that there's more that can be seen or had.
Yep. And I'm seeing the idea
this.
of possibility, right? So now in that moment, what I'm aiming to do in this hypothetical situation is to shift you out of a particular trance, let's say a stuck thought loop that's only producing one set of results or ideas, into a different set of processes, a different mind space, a different, because I know that your mind could do different things from different thoughts. And it didn't find the solution to the problem in the original thoughts. In fact, maybe the original thoughts were creating the problem unwittingly. So we shift out. Now, I'm not saying that guarantees that person's going to go there and stay there. Some people are very good at going, oh, yeah, but, and they go back into their previous trance. But it's like, I'm just giving that as an example of what we might be doing. Now, if you were to ask, going back to our previous conversation, well, is that inside or outside of consciousness? Well, in a sense, it's inside of consciousness and it's outside of consciousness because you're not aware of what is being, you're aware that something is being said. You're not necessarily aware of what specifically is being said. But if your mind flows along with it to make sense of it, your consciousness literally has to shift within it as it goes. So, that's just kind of like an example. I can't even remember what your question was, but that's...
My question was regarding suggestions. What's your view on suggestions? How do you make sense of how they work or why they work?
Right.
And
so they're all moving
are they analog,
minds.
digital?
When you say are they analog or digital, what do you mean by that?
Like, is the suggestion, when you provide one, do you expect it to have like a digital effect, like it either had an effect or it didn't, or do you see it more
No,
as had an
absolutely
effect,
not.
but it depends?
The question is always this: what was the effect? Everything has an effect. Every communication has a response, right? And I'm always encouraging this. If I teach hypnosis live, and it's been a long time since I've done a live hypnosis training, I'm actually doing one this weekend, interestingly enough, for the first time in a long time. But if when I'm teaching this live,
do you want to say a little bit about your weekend hypnosis event?
Maybe, but if we come back to it later on, I'll say something. So this idea, like, is it digital, is it not? A lot of people, they get in their own way as hypnotic facilitators by being hung up in constantly asking themselves the question or worrying about whether hypnosis is happening or not, or whether it's working or not, right? Which is that kind of Aristotelian either or. It either is or it isn't, and it cannot be both, and it cannot be one and not the other, or whatever. So people get caught up in this all the time, and they're in this binary space. It doesn't help. So I always would encourage people, instead of asking, is it happening? Ask the question, what is happening? Stay in what is happening, right? Not is it happening? So if a suggestion is given, instead of going, I've given the suggestion, is it working? That's not a good place to facilitate from. A much better place is how is this person responding to my current and previous communication? Right? What seems to be moving, coming alive, shifting, whatever. Something is always happening, you know?
Yeah.
And that's what you want to pay attention to. And it's irrelevant whether it is working or not. You know, everything, it's always working because people are always responding.
Do you think it's possible for people to again, I'm just referring to my model because my map of how it works, because otherwise wouldn't make sense. But uh, I see it as like you put a suggestion and it's like plus this amount plus amount of units in that direction or not in that direction. Um, do you think by providing a suggestion, there's a way for somebody to block it out, that somebody can block it out and like negate the
Oh
effect?
yeah, sure. And you usually, so there's a couple of ways you can do this. This is why the more stuff you can embed by presupposition, that stuff goes under the radar because people don't get to go, I know what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, if somebody wants to block something out, they need to be aware of the thing they're going to block.
Mm-hmm.
It's like if we were boxing and you threw a punch at me, if I
Mm-hmm.
see it coming, I can block it, right? Or I can, I can evade it somehow. If it catches me unawares, it's going to hit me. There's nothing I can do about that. So I've got to be sort of aware of it or conscious of it, in order to sort of reject it. Now, by the way, that goes for suggestions that invite people into different perspectives or different states of being or ways. It doesn't go for behavioral ones. Somebody could just not respond to that,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, this is often the case. Like, if I say to you right now, I don't know, Alex, when you're gonna scratch your nose, but you may have a sense already of what that might be like, right? Now, if I say something like that to you, right, I just gave you a direct behavioral suggestion, right? I made it slightly indirect by doing some temporal language, I don't know when, and this kind of thing, this kind of thing, this kind of. Did you block that suggestion consciously? Or did you just not respond on that behavioral level?
I
Or are you
just
still
didn't
thinking about how
respond.
much? Yeah. Or are you
I was
just
thinking, I was thinking if there would be an issue that would be coming up and when it would be.
right? So is it itching already then now?
It is a little bit, yeah.
Yeah. That's all right. You don't have to scratch it. But the point of the matter
Did
is
you lean on that a bit?
only in a bashful way, because I know you're going to be watching me. You know, see, I
What
respond
about
to it
a
as well, because my nose is itching too. But like my point
getting
is
those
this:
now it's really bad. Getting those mirror neurons work. What about a situation where you're because let's take the behavior one because that's more difficult one. What if you could somehow get suggestions to fly under the radar and they're behavioral? Do you think and off the first one they don't respond, or off the second one they don't respond? Do you think by at some point by the 10th, the 20th, the 15th one they would respond behaviorally to that in the end?
to the behavioral suggestion.
Yeah.
Maybe, have no idea. I mean, it's going to there's going to be a certain amount of individualism. The way I tend to think about this is I think, what do I want to bring about, right? What's the outcome that I want to bring about? And am I going to play with this in a variety of different ways, right? How am I going to go about doing that? So you were smiling just then because you thought that I was still trying to influence you to scratch your nose, right? Which is fair enough.
It's itching so bad now.
Yeah. So like the thing is, it's just like how many different ways could you bring this about? What is it you want to have happen? A lot of the time, it's not. Some people they're so in love with the idea of hypnosis. It's got to be hypnosis. It's all hypnosis. As far as I'm concerned, who cares whether it's hypnosis? It's just communication. It's just human beings. It's just human thought. It's just human sense making. It's human behavior. It's the whole laboratory of it. The more you play in that laboratory, if you have an interest in such things, the more you will discover things, you will develop options, you will develop choices. Now, here's the thing. going back to your question, if you repeated the same suggestion enough times, would they? Maybe, but why would you repeat the same suggestion over and over again? There's that old NLP presupposition. If what you're doing isn't working, do something different, anything different.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'm just trying to get an understanding of what is the nature of suggestions and how do they work and why do they work?
Maybe you're starting with the word and trying to work back to the world rather than starting with the world and working towards the words. And if you are, it's a very common thing.
Can you
Pe-
unpack that?
Yeah, people do this all the time. They go, "What is hypnosis?"
Mm-hmm.
Right? As if they're touching the thing in itself already. They're not. They've got a word. Well, hypnosis is a word, first of
Mm,
all. It's an idea. So to ask the question, what is it? What is the nature of talking about? Because you've just got a word. Well, it depends what you're
mm,
pointing at with the word,
mm,
right? When you say what is the nature of
yeah.
it, right? So if you go, what is the nature of suggestion? Well, it depends what specifically you're pointing at with the word suggestion. It would be better to say, what is the nature of that suggestion, or that suggestion, or that
Mm-hmm.
suggestion, or that suggestion? Or ask the question, what is it that's happening here in this moment with this thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because suggestion is a word that can be used in a variety of different ways, as all words are. Do you know the difference between an intentional versus an extensional definition? That'll take that as a
No idea. No.
no, right? So this is extension and intention, right?
Mm-hmm.
Extension means to reach out, intention
Mm,
means to go in. So, in terms of definitions, intentional definition, that's not intentional with a T in the middle, it's intentional with an S, intentional, right?
uh-huh. Okay.
Right. An intentional definition. It's not to do with intent and intention, it's to do with intention, looking within rather than looking without.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, an intentional definition is like a dictionary definition. Right. So if you go, well, what's hypnosis? And somebody says, well, hypnosis is like, if I say hypnosis is the use of language and communication, yada, 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 that's an intentional definition. Somebody else will give a different intentional definition. They'll say hypnosis is a special state of mind that renders people uniquely open to suggestion. Right. The thing about all intentional definitions is that they rely upon other words to define words. They rely on words to
Mm-hmm.
define words or ideas to define ideas, right? They go forever inwards. Um, so you might go, special state that renders people uniquely open to suggestion. Well, what's suggestion? And you go and look that
I
up,
see.
right? And then you get another bunch of words that tell you what suggestion is. Okay.
It's intentional because it's inside the frame of
Yeah.
language and concepts and ideas, and it's
Yeah.
extensional when it's outside, external
Right.
to the frame of language.
So here's how an extensional definition works. What's hypnosis? Hypnosis, what they're doing over there.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
those people over there, they're doing hypnosis as well. And they're doing hypnosis. Oh, and see what's going on in that moment? We could call that hypnosis too, right? Or at least that's the way I'm using the word,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if you go, what's coffee? And you go, well, coffee is a brown, hot liquid beverage that people drink, sometimes with cream, sometimes black, right? That's an intentional definition. If you go, what's coffee? You go, this is coffee, taste it. And this is coffee, and this is coffee. And they go, what about this? Oh, no, that's lemonade, right?
Mm-hmm.
So by reaching out into the world, you start to get like a different way of making sense of things. Now, like kids, they learn a lot of language initially, intentionally, right? They see a dog and their mum goes, doggy, points to the dog and gives the label.
Extensionally, you mean?
Extensionally, yeah. Points
Mm.
to the dog and gives the label. Right. And then after a while, the kid picks a pattern. They know what a dog is, not because somebody gave them a bunch of words to describe a dog, but they've looked into the world and picked a bunch of patterns which equal their definition of dog.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So if you then think suggestion is a particular thing, and we've got to find it, um, you're entering the realm of the intentional,
Yeah.
right? And it's like, and if you, especially if you go, well, how is that different? And you're trying to use words to differentiate words.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And in the end, it pays to get more extensional. So it's not overly important to chase too much what is suggestion. Right. What we know is we're going to use communication. We know we're going to use language. We're going to drop words in. It doesn't matter what you call it. And we want to create certain effects that way. We want to be able to use our words strategically and tactically. Some of that is going to be about the ideas that we're dropping in using the words. Some of it's going to be to do with tonality, nonverbal stuff, which can evoke different responses. Some of it's going to be to do with literally where we invite people to place their mind, place their attention.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it's going to be due to the steps we invite people to take, then their cognitive maneuvering. And if you go, but is that suggestion? Well, in the end, who gives a crap what you call it? If you see list, so I think there can be, you can end up in a hall of mirrors
Yeah, I see that now.
by trying to get into this intentional definition. Um, which isn't to say it isn't sometimes useful to go, well, here's an intentional definition. But if it's not useful, it's hardly likely to get more useful by trying to add more words to it.
Yeah.
So start with the world and work to the words rather than starting with the words and working to the world. Right. And I'm very happy. Like, as a guy that's taught hypnosis many years ago, I did an event that had another speaker at it, a guy called Irving Kirsch, who's an academic from the academic world of hypnosis.
Mm-hmm.
And he believed that basically hypnosis, as a hypnosis researcher of an academic persuasion, should only be legally practicable by trained professionals of a, either academic or medical background, and that
Uh-huh.
regular people should be prohibited in law from practicing hypnosis.
I'd love to see how he defined hypnosis and how he
Well,
managed to
he didn't define hypnosis. And of course,
mhm.
that's the thing. And I had a talk directly after this guy, and he just dropped this to a room full of lay hypnotists. And of course, it was a bit of a buzzkill for the event, um, in my opinion. So I was going to do a talk on a different subject, but I decided I would address what he said because I wanted to change the mood in the room and sort of transcend the buzzkill that had just taken place. But one of the points I made in that talk is if somebody said to me, James, you can't be a hypnotist anymore, you can't do hypnosis anymore, I'd be like, fine, that's okay. I won't. And then I would carry on doing exactly what I did, but with a different set of labels for it. Because hypnosis isn't a thing in a neatly quantifiable sense. There's just a lot of instances of that. Defining hypnosis is like defining art.
Mhm.
Defining suggestion is like defining, postmodernism. It's just like there's only so far you might end up going before you drive yourself. Immanuel Kant, the famous German philosopher who changed the way people thought about sense making in the world in a very profound way. He pointed out one of his, I think his first sort of big piece was called A Critique of Pure Reason, and he really valued reason.
Mhm.
But he pointed out that reason could only go so far. It could never find out about things in themselves, right? That it could only find out about our impressions of things. And if we tried to, and we were often driven to, if we would try to use reason to find out about things in themselves, reason would take us so far and often create a lot of good results, but then would get into the swamp and start to create contradictions. And that's the inevitable result of trying to pursue reason past the point that reason can yield results and returns. At which point you've got to drop out, you've got to use a different system. So that's
Mhm.
why he did his like critique of pure reason. It's just like pure reason. Reason's good. Pure reason, not so good. So stay out the swamp. And in the end, it's just like, well, what am I looking to do here? If I'm training myself as a hypnotist or as an influential communicator, what kind of effects do I want to bring about? Yes, of course, listen to different people who are experts in those fields and hear how they make sense of what they're doing or how the craft works. But ultimately, in the end, what you're getting from them are ideas, not absolute facts or not truths about things in themselves, as Kant would put it. There we go. It's my little philosophical detour.
Yeah, I see. I see the distinction you're making, and I can see. I see how that's a fallacy and can lead to, well, leads to kind of going in circles and not really being able to answer the question itself. And I appreciate that shift in perspective. If I was to bring it, I guess in this case, I'd have to bring it more to a ground level, more of a pragmatic thing than like in real world usage. What the question I was trying to answer or to figure out is how much can you, I guess, rely on providing specific behavioral suggestions to the unconscious mind. We've already spoken the previous chat that behavioral, if rather than going for behavioral, you go to evoke something or change a shift in how something is, how they perceive something.
Yeah, that would be
But
my choice. Yeah.
or even I guess in terms of that, I mean, in that one I can really see, because if you even by speaking more like more in a more punctuated manner with more
Yeah.
force, you can create a certain kind of energy. So I can see that evoking is definitely a preferable way to do it. But what I'm
So,
trying to
in answer to your question, how much can you rely on? My answer to that would be don't rely on anything. Just don't rely on anything. Stop relying on things and have different ways of bringing things about. And then you don't have to rely on anything.
and see whether or not something works, and if it doesn't, just
Yeah.
not use
So,
it.
this is the point of running like live feedback loops. It's the cybernetic approach to it.
Hmm.
Cybernetic just means working with feedback loops, real time feedback loops. It doesn't mean robots or anything like that. Um, so, like, the more you're just working with live feedback, the more you're just nudging the system and paying attention to which direction things are going in. Like, is that more of what I want or less of what I want? You know, that kind of thing. Then you don't have to rely on anything. In fact, the last thing you want to do is rely on anything. Rely on to be able to prod that system in a variety of different ways. You want variety. You want options, not a thing you can rely on. Now, this is not a heartening message for many people that want to learn formal hypnosis, because the vast majority of people that want to learn formal hypnosis want a reliable method. You know, they're not really interested in the art, the craft, the dance, whatever. I'm not judging anybody for that. I just puts them in a position where they're never going to be as good as they could be if they recognize that almost anything they want to achieve can be achieved in a variety of different ways. And the more options they have available to them in, in terms of tactics, strategy, this kind of thing, the more likely they are to be able to realize good outcomes with a whole array of different sorts of people in different sorts of contexts.
But and in that respect, they should consider using something that could be defined as suggestion. The reason I'm using that term loosely to cover different things.
Yeah, I mean, use suggestion, use whatever tools,
Yeah.
pattern interrupts, suggestions, inversions, reverse psychopher. There's all sorts of things you could call these things. I mean, like my Lexi did a really good bit of business with Lois, our daughter. I was admiring this from afar. This is a really nice piece of work. And Lexi's not a professional in this area. She just kind of picked some stuff up from me. But Lois has got a performance coming up on this Circus Foundation course she's doing. So she's got this performance coming up, and she has decided that she doesn't like performing, and she's running a trance that creates a lot of fear around performing and anxiety around performing, and that gets in the way of her creating the piece to perform.
Hmm. That's not
Right?
good if you're training to be a performer and you have a fear for
No,
performing.
she's not training to be a performer. She's doing a Circus Skills Foundation course. Her argument
Uh,
is that she didn't do it to be a performer. She's doing it to develop the skills for her own personal, reward and that kind of thing.
hmm.
Um, so she's kind of, and they're going, well, what kind of performer do you want to be? And she's like, I never came here to be a performer. However, that's part of the course. So, where do you go with that? So it's kind of really interesting. And I heard Lexi doing this and it got an immediate shift, and I thought it probably would. Um, Lexi said, well, why don't you make your anxiety about doing it the theme of the piece, the theme of the performance, right? Boom, immediate mind shift. Now, I suspected it would because it's got the same structure as, an NLP applied to self in the sleight of mouth package. Now, you get these things like these paradoxical solutions. You basically got the Ouroboros snake that eats its own tail.
Hmm.
When you feed things back into themselves like that, you often get radical shifts in ground of being that are not based in logic or sense or anything like that. Right. But it was like, I heard this happen, and then I heard the immediate change in behavior afterwards. And suddenly, Lois's creative faculty was able to engage in creating a performance piece and was starting to get
Hmm.
interested in being creative and playing with the ideas. Right. Because, of course, it's the more, the more. It's like, this is a terrible thing. I've got to get away from it. But I don't want to get away from it because if I get away from the terrible fear, then I have to do the thing that I fear. There's an inherent bind pattern. So you play binds through
Hmm.
paradoxical solutions. Now, is that suggestion? Is it hypnosis? I don't know. You could know. You could know. You could make a case that it isn't. You could argue that that's a kind of suggestion. You could say, no, it's not. It's a mental strategy. It's a tactic. The point of the matter is, it's a dance, right? And you want to dance a different result. You want to dance a different state of being out of uh, out of that person or whoever you're working with or whatever it is that you're doing. So I don't know how helpful it is to analyze that in terms of hypnosis or suggestion or anything, or just to go, what is it that's happening here? Right? Start with the world and not the words. Start with the
Yeah.
events and not the descriptions of the events or the labels that you would put on the events. It was a nice bit of work, though.
Yeah, that is good. Made it very meta onto itself.
Hmm. Exactly. So you've got that, you've got that applied to self, but you're applying a different logical level back. See, look, it's useful to take something like that and go, how did that work? What might have happened there? Right. Then you're starting with the world and working to ideas or working to words. Right. That is a much richer way, I think, to learn anything. But we're talking about hypnosis and influential communication here, than it is to start with these off the shelf concepts and try and figure out what exactly they mean.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Going from practice, from application, then to theory makes, yeah. The
Hmm.
theory is there to create distinction in what you see in the real world and to be able to then build upon. But if you're not starting from the real world, yeah, you can't actually. Yeah, no, that's a good distinction. Thank you.
You're welcome. So that's probably another podcast there in and of itself.
Yeah. Um,